Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to, well, actually it's my first conference talk ever. So I will, if I come over a little bit nervous, I am. I am. But this also means that you are my first conference audience ever. And the people who know me, they know that I'm like a bit informal and I would like to know who I'm talking to. So, since my talk is going to cover code and code styling, I want to know in what type of code you all program. And well, I'm going to start with the most simple possibility. So who, by the raise of hands, who of you programs in Java? I would have imagined, otherwise I would be at the wrong conference. Oh. Yes, okay. And the big four, I'm going to cover the big four. So we had Java. And who of you programs in Python? Just a little less, okay. Then who of you programs in JavaScript? It combines well, yeah, okay. And last but not least, C#. Perhaps a couple of C#ers there? Okay, well, today we're going to talk about code and the way you write your code, so coding semantics. And a wise man once said, I'm not going to contradict him because that would make me very unwise, but a wise man once said, code is how we tell our colleagues how we feel about them. And I'm not disagreeing with him, totally not, no. But I would like to add something that perhaps code could be a reflection of who we are. So during our my talk this session, we're going to talk about code and code formatting and code style. What we're not going to talk about is how you format your code by your IDE or which company conventions you have concerning code. We're not going to cover that. But first, before we dive into all the good stuff, I haven't even introduced myself. How impolite. My name is Rosanne Joosten. I am a psychology graduate at the University of Amsterdam. And afterwards, I started programming. And that was in 2015. And I'm currently working at Blue for IT. And when I say to people, and actually some colleague of mine, that I was doing this code, and when I say to people that I studied psychology, they always respond with, oh, so you know who I am, you can read me, and you know what kind of personality I possess. Well, let me start by saying that's not true. I can perhaps do an educated guess based on research that I remembered, which is also a hard thing, I forget it all the time. So I want you to remember that I'm not going to read you, I'm not going to make any conclusions. Perhaps I do some educated guesses. After my study in psychology, I started programming, as I stated before. And when I started at first, I took a lot of concern about the code reviews I got from a lot of colleagues who were, some of them are in this room right now. And at the start, I thought it was, when I got comments on my code styling, I just noted them and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it next time, I'm going to do it like this. And then I got another code review and that colleague, he said a totally different thing. So I was like, okay, so code style is not something I can remember or I can do correctly. It has to do something with preference. And when we're talking about preference, yeah, well, what does influence your preference? Well, I thought perhaps that could be personality. And personality, it is a concept, a psychological concept, and it is not something, all psychological concepts are not something we can measure. It is not a hard science. It's not like distance, it is not like volume, it is not like temperature. And that's because all these psychological concepts, these are concepts that we, most of the time, invented. Like we wanted to see something there, so we created a model around it. And so when we want to draw any conclusions about such an abstract concept, we have to pick sort of like a way to look at it. And when we're talking about personality, there have been a couple of theories and models there. And one that has been validated quite often is the Big Five personality traits, or the five-factor model. And this five-factor model, as the name states, consists of 5 factors, and you can remember it quite easily when you abbreviate it, because it stands for ocean, with the O for openness, the C for conscientiousness, the E for extroversion, the A for agreeableness, and the N for neuroticism. And I will cover them, well, in a bit more detail later, because these are just words right now. But I want you to know that within every person, each of these 5 factors, you have them on a certain level. So you can measure them within a person using questionnaires. Frequently used questionnaire is the NEO. It was from the 1980s, something like that. And each person has a certain amount of level of each of these 5 factors. But first, let me describe in more detail what these 5 factors are. So let's continue with begin with our O for openness. And openness is not so much a person who is willing to share everything. It's not a person who blabs out everything, like, well, I do quite often. No, it's more like your ability to stand open for new experiences and new situations. You can see it to some degree as a factor that has to do with being curious and adventurous and want to experience new things. So, like I said, you can score on a certain level on each of these 5 factors. And, well, I gave you a high and a low here, so we're going to be on the same page later on when we're reviewing code. But when you score low on openness, you tend to be more pragmatic and data-driven and dogmatic and, well, close-minded. And I always like to imagine a kind of Sheldon person type here. Someone who is really set in their own ways and not curious about new experiences. And on the high end of the spectrum, when you score high on openness, then you tend to be unpredictable. Well, you can be quite unpredictable, and you tend to seek new and thrilling experiences, risky behavior. So that's the other end. We're not one way or the other. You can score in between. That is our O of openness and our O of ocean. When we continue with our ocean, we have our C for conscientiousness. And conscientiousness, you can see it as it has something to do with being organized and structured. So when you see these two examples, I think we all know a person who has one like the left and one who has one like the right. And a person who would score higher on on conscientiousness would be using the right telephone, because he's structured and organized. And I will give you a high and a low again to be more clear. So people who score high on conscientiousness, they can also be a bit stubborn and well-focused and hardworking, responsible. And I would like to put if I have to put a face here, it would be like Lisa Simpson. She's very contradicting her little brother Bart, who is on the low end of the spectrum. Well, Bart Simpson is more spontaneous and sloppy and lacks reliability. And here research has found the first correlation, that they have found that when you score high on conscientiousness, then you tend to have an aptitude for programming. Which, well, when you explain it, it's like, okay, that's logic, right? It's logical. because we programmers, we get like this idea of, or this wish that the business people want us to make, and it's like abstract, or it's like something in the world, and we have to give it structure to put it into a program, because otherwise it wouldn't work or it wouldn't be maintainable. We have to organize these thoughts and structure them and make it into an application. So it is, when you think about it, it's quite logical that you have an aptitude for programming when you score high on conscientiousness. Not saying that it's all the time, but people tend to have an aptitude for programming. That was our C of ocean. We had our O for openness, our C for conscientiousness. And then we continue with our E for extroversion. And well, extroversion is kind of a sensitive topic, I think, when you're talking with programmers, because this stereotype exists that all programmers, well, they are introverts, scoring low on extroversion. And I'm going to show you the high and the low because, well, it is found that, that this stereotype is actually true. Research has found that most programmers score low on extroversion. But when you look at the highs and the lows, it's not really weird. I'm not talking about the people who are low on extroversion, that we are reserved or reflective, but it's more that it costs us more energy to have social interaction. So when you want to work in a software team, and you can pick between all these roles we have, then a software developer is the one who is talking. What is it? Oh, okay. Yeah. When you have to pick a role from a software development team, then a programmer, he or she is the one with the least social interaction, because the tester has to talk more often with the product owner, and the product owner has to talk with the business, and the scrum master has to organize every meeting and plan everything ahead. And the programmer, he or she is most of the time during his or her day, most of the time he or she is just looking at his screen, his computer before him. So when you score high on extroversion and you gain energy from social interaction, then it would, your job would suck, right? Because you would stare at your screen all day and you would miss it. So I'm explaining why it's logical that we programmers tend to score low on extroversion, but I'm also trying to say that we shouldn't be ashamed of it, because, well, it's not that we don't like social interaction, we just don't like it with a room full of people staring at you. And yeah, we just like it in smaller groups, right? That was our E. I'm going to repeat it over and over again, the ocean, so you remember it all. So we have our O for openness, we have our C for conscientiousness, and our E for extroversion. Then we continue with our with our A. And the A stands for agreeableness. And agreeableness you can see as the amount of a person's friendliness, or a person's cooperativeness. And this level of personality trait has been found to correlate with overall team satisfaction. So on overall, the average level of agreeableness in a team tends to correlate positively with the overall team satisfaction. Then that's because, well, everybody's more cooperative, right? So it's all fun and games because we all like each other and we're friendly. But when I give you the high and the low, well, apart from being high that we're all cooperative and such, you can also, well, go to the extreme and be more naive and submissive. And, well, that's not good either, right? So the very high is not only the best. And on the other end of the spectrum, the low, it's not that that's totally bad, because We need the critical thinkers and the people who express themselves critically. And we need the people to challenge us. So that's the low and that's the high of agreeableness. Once again, then we have our O for openness, our C for conscientiousness, our E for extroversion, and our A for agreeableness. Last but not least, we have our N for neuroticism. And neuroticism, I don't want you to be confused with being neurotic, because it's a totally different word. The level of neuroticism has to do with your level of emotional stability. Actually, it is the inverse. So a person who is high on neuroticism is low on emotional stability. But they couldn't use it because then our abbreviation wouldn't be ocean. But maybe it's an easy way to remember. And before, when I got to know all of you, some of you stated that you program in Python. And actually, this is really funny. I've never programmed in Python, so I'm not gonna, it's not just researches I'm repeating. They have found that the programmers who prefer to program in Python, that they tend to score high on neuroticism. And the people scoring high on neuroticism, they're a little bit more insecure and nervous, and well, they're emotional and reactive. And I have been told that when you start to program with Python, compared to other big languages, that Python has a lower threshold to start with. That for people who don't have a background in programming, that it's easier to start with and to understand than other languages like Java, which have more layers in there and more abstract complexion. So it's again, it's quite logical that the people who are more insecure and will get upset more often about negative things, that they start with an easier language, right? And again, I don't want to say that the high end that's all bad, because we need reactive people when something goes wrong. And when you look at the other end of the spectrum, they can be stable and calm and secure, good for them. But they also tend to be a bit uninspiring and unconcerned. So like they're made of rock or something like that when you're at the total extreme end of the low end of the spectrum. Now that we have our ocean, O for openness, C for conscientiousness, E for extroversion, A for agreeableness, and N for neuroticism, can we say that there are two types of developers? Yeah, I took this example. It's like a basic example, right? I couldn't take the example with the spaces and the tabs because then you wouldn't see the example. But they're there. It's the spaces, those are tabs. No. In 2016, a company called Pan, they challenged programmers to build an algorithm which could predict personality traits, the 5 personality traits we just covered, based on certain features in someone's code. And we're going to look at a few of these code snippets and looking at a couple of examples which contain these features. And when we look at them, I'm going to, stamp them with our ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. And, since it is a gradient level, since you can score a certain level on each of these 5 factors, every association can be associated with the high end of the factor or the low end. So when I mean like people who score high on neuroticism tend to prefer Python, I would stamp it with a red N, just to be clear. So let's continue with our next example. First example. gonna give you some time. And please don't be too hard on me because I wrote this piece of code myself just to make an example. And perhaps, well, the feature I tried to display isn't coming over, and maybe my own personality slipped in there. But as far as I can see, or try to display, this colleague of ours, we're just gonna pretend that a colleague of ours just committed this. And this colleague of mine, he tends to prefer using long words, long names for like, well, methods and for parameters. And I thought the field was also pretty long, but I didn't highlight that. And well, research has found that the programmers who tend to use long words, that they score high on conscientiousness. So these, just to fresh you up, no. These people who score high on conscientiousness, those were the LISAs, the organized and the structured and responsible people. And well, my educated guess would be that the people who are structured and organized, that they perhaps prefer all their method names and parameter names also to be structured, and they just want to be clear towards the colleague that is reading them. And it can perhaps even be so that he structures his method names always in the same way, like this is what we're going to do, and this is where it came from, and this is what it's going to be, or something like that. So maybe it's just being overall way too organized. And well, when a colleague of mine committed this piece of code, and I see instantly, whoa, this is using way too much long words. This person, well, he or she would score high on conscientiousness. And well, as it may happen, I am lacking a Scrum Master, right? So I'm just gonna go to this colleague. Because, well, Scrum Masters, they have to be organized and they have to be responsible and stuff like that. So when I'm lacking a Scrum Master and I'm seeing this piece of code, I'm gonna give her a chance to try. Please try this out, because I'm really curious about your results. Let's continue with the next piece of code. And perhaps it's more clearly when I'm showing it like this. It's the same piece of code, exactly the same. But my colleague committed it like this. Well, I think with this before and after thing, we can all see that this person is not providing the necessary spaces. It's all really cramped up there. And it has been found to correlate with people scoring low on neuroticism. So these were the emotionally stable people. Yeah, exactly. The secure and the calm and the, well, James Bonds. You can not emotionally, you can penetrate them. So what I would do, he committed this piece of code to a project, and the deadline from the project was like 2 weeks ago. And the product owner, he doesn't know yet. And he's really mean. I don't want to tell him that we're not meeting the deadline. And then I see this piece of code. And I'm like, oh, this one is emotionally very stable. He can be penetrated. I'm just going to send this colleague, I'm just going to send him or her. You go and tell the product owner that we're not going to get the deadline. He cannot be upset, right? He can take it. Well, better than I, at least. And then afterwards, he took like all the main load of the product owner, and then afterwards, we get just like a little bit. But we can comfort him as well. That's what I would do. This is also exactly the same piece of code. Well, not exactly, for sure. And I think I don't have to mention what's the feature here, right? This person is providing way too much space, like in an inappropriately amount of space. And well, you think maybe then this person scores high on neuroticism. Well, that's not what has been found. This colleague, he tends to score very high on openness. So these were the creative and curious and explorers and the adventurous kind of person. And now I would really, I'm really curious. I want to test my own theory. So I think when we compare this piece of code with, can we take it back? Yeah, with this piece of code, which is, I hope we agree, both bad, right? It's two evils. But when we have to choose, all of you, when you can choose, would you prefer? Oh, something's gonna happen again. I'm still hearable? Yes, okay. Yeah, if we have to choose between two evils, way too little space, way too much space, who would prefer this example, way too little space? Interesting. Oh, this is very interesting. Okay, I'm going to get to it why. And we already knew it. And who would prefer this? That would be the other half. Oh, we're almost half and half. Oh, that's awesome. No, that's really curious. Well, no, because it has been found, just like the people who prefer Python, that it has been found that the people who program in Java, that they tend to score, well, have a higher level of openness. So I would have expected, since we're all Java programmers, that the majority would prefer this example, because this is also associated with scoring high on openness. But there you see, psychology research is just... So, there goes my credibility. Let's continue. Let's continue. And this is a tweet from, well, today it is exactly 3 months ago. And, yeah, oh, you read it. And it has to do with using the asterisks, the wildcard asterisks, when you're importing libraries. And there's, well, since this is 3 months ago, it is still quite debatable what we all would like, or what we all should do. Well, and when you read the tweet, you can still contribute to this tweet. When you read the tweet, some say, well, it's very bad, it's bad advice. Some say, no, it's really, really bad advice. Others say, well, I use it all the time, but well, what does he know? He still programs in Java 6. And others say, well, I prefer, I program in another language, but I would love to use it. And in every discussion, we have someone who says, well who cares? Well, it's a stupid discussion. And actually, research has found something on this. The use of an asterisk, or the don't use, the misuse, the don't use. Yeah, well, the people who don't use the asterisk. So, again, I'm really curious. I'm saying nothing about the level of openness, but I'm really curious. And now I'm talking about usage in your own free time project, because the job I'm currently working on, we're not allowed to use the asterisks. We have to import the libraries selectively. But, well, it would be quite easy to use the asterisks. So maybe in your free time project you would like to. So I'm curious. Again, by the raise of hands, who would, in their own free project, where you're allowed to do anything, who would import selectively? And who would use the asterisks? Oh, okay. Yeah, so you can still contribute to this tweet stream. And now you're all afraid what's going to happen. No, it's... It has been found that the people who selectively import their libraries, that they tend to score low on neuroticism. So, again, these are the strong and tough people who can take anything, right? The secure. Yeah, the secure people. And, well, after that, this person has gone to my product owner. After this person's come to my product owner, we're in a debatable discussion, and they're all, well, on my end, they're all emotions because he's being mean and stuff. And it wouldn't help me, it's not advisable to play on his emotions, right? Because he can be penetrated. So if that's your goal, to get your colleague upset because, well, he's being mean or something like that, well, you shouldn't, because it's going to only drain your own energy. You use that information how you would want. Next piece of code. And well, and you can read it all because I took the time to write out the comments. But I think compared to the other pieces of code, we all see what the feature here is, right? This person uses a lot of singular line comments. And now we have been over a couple of examples already. So maybe you got the feeling with which of these 5 factors it has to do with. So, first I'm going to repeat them all first so you all remember what ocean we were talking about. So we had our O for openness, the adventurous, curious people. The C for conscientiousness, organized. The E for extroversion, don't need explaining. The A for agreeableness, friendliness. And the N for neuroticism, so emotional stability. And without debating if it has to do with high or low, who thinks, by the raise of hands, that it has something to do with the level of openness? That's 3, 4. 5, okay. Who thinks it has something to do with the level of conscientiousness? A lot more, I'm not going to count. It's a lot more. Who thinks it has something to do, you can only vote once, by the way. Didn't say that. Who thinks it has something to do with the level of extroversion? Okay, okay. And who thinks it has something to do with the level of agreeableness? Seriously, everybody voted once? Okay. And who has something to do with the level of neuroticism? Last but not least. Okay. And it's always with this psychological research, when you hear the answer, it's like, yeah, now you can explain it, right? Because it has something to do with the level of extroversion. These are the talkative people. The people who score high on extroversion, they love to talk a lot. And what do you do when you're, well, you chose the wrong role in the development team. What do you do when you, well, love programming, but you also love to talk a lot, communicate? Well, apart from bothering every colleague, the people whom I worked with know how talkative you can be. But what do you do when everybody's wearing noise-canceling headphones and you just wanna talk?
Slack.
Or Slack, yeah, or you use Slack or HipChat. No, you can talk through your code. You can just explain to the people who's gonna read it, like it's a future present or something like that. Like, yeah, I did this. It was really fun. This is what I can do. Yeah. So these are the people who score high on extroversion. What? Hack their headphone. Yeah, you give that a try. Next example. And please don't be shocked. And if you're shocked by the first two, don't read any further. These... Just going to give... So these are actual Git commit messages. I didn't make them up. There was like this GitHub project of 8 years ago, and they extracted the commit messages. And these are some examples I found there. And well, wow, does these Git commit messages have in common? Well, swear words, yes, they use a lot of swear words and foul language. And I can let you guess again, but I think that a lot of you would get it correctly. It has to do with our level of friendliness, agreeableness. So the people who score low on agreeableness, they tend to use a lot of swear words. And, well, I hope you can't use them in your code, so that's why I took a git commit example. But these git commit messages, when a colleague of mine commits with these git commit messages, apart from, well, me not liking him and, well, being a bit worried, I can go to him or her with my new idea. Like, I have this new idea about how we should build our application. Like, the architecture can be like this or like that. And you can just go to him or her and let him challenge you. And let him be critical. Because sometimes we need these critics from people who are not ashamed or bothered about how the other person is going to react to that. So that's what I would do, apart from being a bit offended that he uses these commit messages. But no, this is not. There was not the question was if it was the same person. No, it was not the same person. Yeah. I got the. No, it is not my company. No, no. These were not from my company. No. I didn't say where my current job was, right? So no, nobody's offended. No. No, this is from a GitHub project, and the link I have afterwards. I have the link. And even these git commit messages were not only to a Java repository. So it was not only Java programmers who used these commit messages. So what does it say about us, Java programmers? Well, I did some research. No, other people did. And, well, apparently, these are comments. This is an analysis of comments on subreddit topics. So apparently, compared to the other languages, we are third to worst, unhappy, mean. We say a lot of mean things. Or other people do. Or other people do on a Java. Maybe it's not us. I think it's the other people. Other people don't like Java and they comment, well, ugly on this subreddit. Well, luckily, there is also done the opposite. Or not so luckily, actually. They have extracted the nice words. And it turns out we're not so nice either. So we're third to worst, and we're fourth to last in saying nice things. And I would like to state that this analysis was done between the period of August 2013 and July 2014. So there have been some Java releases since. So perhaps when we do this analysis now, it's going to be better. I think we're going to be ending on the better end of the spectrum, right? We're all so happy with Java. No, nobody. Okay. Now that we have some research covered, can we say that there are two types of developers? Well, as I hope I brought over, we cannot say for certain. We can't draw any facts from the code people commit or the language people use. We cannot. But we can venture an educated guess. Based on the research we remember, because, well, maybe you're going to forget all of this, and then don't take any guesses because you don't know the research, right? Here's some links I want to share with you. First one is for the personality test. This is an English test. You can, so you can all take it. And it's gonna give you an outcome on all of the 5 factors and your level on those. And the challenge, of course, with the algorithms the researchers used, you can find it on Next and the GitHubs for the file language and then the comments per language. And, well, I'm a fast talker, as it turns out. So this is kind of it. If you have any questions, please do. We have 10 minutes left. Yeah.
You told us something about single-line comments. What about multi-line comments or block comments?
Yeah. So a question was that I stated a correlation between the use of single-line comments and being extrovert or scoring high on extroversion. And what about using multiple-line comments? Well, I left that out intentionally. Thanks for pointing it out. Because they used it in the algorithm, but there was not a significant result with any of the 5 factors there. So you can say, conclude something about the level of extroversion based on a person's use of single-line codes, but not on the use of multiple-line codes. Yes?
I was wondering, you showed us examples that were very much syntactical, but is there also research on things like use a lot of patterns or write spaghetti code, say, or more semantic things than these?
Yeah, so the question was, I used a lot of code examples with semantics, and is there any conclusion found on patterns and writing spaghetti code, right?
Yeah,
so more the content, yeah. Well, first of all, that would be really hard to extract from a code snippet. I can imagine if you get pieces of code and you have to extract the level of spaghettiness.
Well, there are complexity measures, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would challenge the researchers if there are any in this. I haven't found it yet. No, I haven't found it. But that would be, well, very awesome if there were. Thanks for, I wanted to incorporate it and I forgot it. The question was, what's the purpose of these conclusions and what can we do with it? Yeah, during my talk I said some things like the overall team satisfaction and things like that. I think you're going in that direction. Well, it is kind of debatable if you would use this in forming a team or something like that. I would prefer not to, but that's more because all this research it's so, yeah, based on research. If you want to, like how I want it in general. Yeah, the only thing I know is that this challenge was how do you say it? Created in 2016. I don't know what the purpose was. Maybe they just want to use practice in algorithms. I don't know. Please, yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Yes.
So, do these personality facts about coding have to do with us, with someone who's just starting to code, or with the personality of our educators actually, because we learn from them?
You mean, the question was, does this semantics and these features, does they have anything to do with our personality or perhaps with the person who we got it from?
I think or big that if my senior learns to like use a lot of spaces, maybe I develop that personality.
Yeah, maybe your senior taught you to use a lot of spaces. that's possible, of course, that's possible. But I believe, like I have experienced, at least I experienced it, that during my code reviews, I got, well, both ends of the opinion. Like, I think in every team you are in, that you're always with a mixture of opinions, and some people just like a lot of space and others don't. So I think in the end, you're going to form your own preference. That's my educated guess. Yes.
Independent of company coding standards, is there some kind of correlation between the development environment where you are? So, in big or small companies, or companies that work agile, or companies that work old school. So, does your coding style is like thing you're born with, or does it develop over time? Independent from the coding styles of the boss saying you have to do it this way. Is your personal way of coding developing over time? And is this also reflected? What kind of correlations do you have?
Okay, so the question was, if I understood you correctly, if these preferences that we have in code styling, if they develop over time, or if you're born with it, right?
Yeah, and if there are things like big or small companies or working in an agile way where you say, I used to have a very structured way of working and coding, and now I'm agile after a lot of refactoring.
Yeah, so also the influence of what company you are in and which team methods you use. Yeah, well, when you're talking about nature and nurture in psychology, you always have two camps, and there hasn't been a conclusion yet about nature and nurture in personality traits. So I can imagine that there's also no, well, conclusion to be made, a factual conclusion to be made about code preference, code style preference, and nature or nurture, like you're born with it or developed. And well, talking about team structure, yeah, there has been found other correlations that when you work in an agile team, that it's more productive when you are more extrovert. So there, these correlations can happen again. I'm not really sure. I don't know all the research about this topic, like which other factors influence code style preference. Yes.
Okay, so maybe the question I'm gonna ask is somehow related to what was a bit earlier mentioned, and I can agree that maybe there is no specific result that you would like to follow or a specific goal that you would like to reach, but I'm pretty sure that by the very end of this research, you came up with a few results. Do you see yourself having changed the approach to your colleagues when it comes to approaching them?
Okay, yeah. So I took a lot of examples, like now I approach this colleague like this, based on the research I read. Well, like a lot of psychological research, I believe that psychological research happens and that the conclusions exist, but I also believe in the element of chance. So I would never, when I see these pieces of code, I would never conclude that it is absolutely and 100% true about what research has found. I would always be curious about, oh, maybe it's there. That's why I, for example, took the polling with Java and code preference, because, well, research suggested that the correlation will be there. Didn't see it. So it's more something to hold in your mind, like, okay, maybe this correlation can exist and you can look for it. No other questions? Well, thank you very much.